Tri-County Bank, your local bank with branches in Plymouth and Swanton. We are a small-town bank with big-town hospitality and skills. Come visit either branch for equally good service. Member FDIC.
Vasya, Vasya, what should I do? Go, get out of here, you have our child. But how can I leave him when he is still saying, go, leave, save the baby? I woke up the next morning thinking, I have to get to Moscow. But my mother looked at me and she said, where do you think you're going? The way you are? So I took my father. The worst nuclear power plant explosion in history occurred in Chernobyl in 1986. This disaster affected over 2.1 million people, but due to communist control in the area at the time of the explosion, these victims' voices were silenced. Years later, the story of Vasya and Lyusia Ignatenko's struggles were released in Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alkievich. He was in a special hospital for radiation. You needed a pass just to get in. So I paid the man at the door, and then I begged another before I was allowed into the office of the head radiologist. The first thing she asked me was, do you have any children? I knew that I needed to say at least 2. If I said any less, she would not let me in. So I said, a boy and a girl. Good, then you don't need to have any more. Listen, no crying, or I will kick you out right away. No hugging or kissing. You have half an hour. When I got to his room, he was laughing and playing cards. When he saw me, he said, oh great, now it is over. Even here she has found me. I just laughed and said, and where did you run off to? He wanted to hug me, but the doctors wouldn't let him. Every day it was like meeting a new person. The burns came to the surface. At first he was covered in little lesions, and then they grew. His skin started coming off in layers, a white film. The only thing that kept me going was that it all happened so fast that there wasn't any time to think. There wasn't any time to cry. One day I walked into his room and he pulled 3 carnations out from under his pillow for me. He had gotten a nurse to buy them for me. So I ran over and I hugged him and I kissed him before he pushed me off saying, no! What do you think you are doing? What did the doctors tell you? It was a good thing that it was in the hallway, not his room, that my head started spinning. I grabbed the windowsill as a doctor walked by, but he stopped. And he looked at me, and he said, are you pregnant? No, no. I was so scared that someone would hear. Other mothers also came to the hospital, but they were not allowed in. But he wasn't even in an ordinary room anymore. He was in a special biochamber behind a transparent curtain. They had special instruments so that without going through the curtain, the soldiers could give him shots. The soldiers could place the catheter because the doctors would no longer go near him. But I pushed the curtain aside and I went in with him because he got so bad that I could not leave him for a second. He was calling to me constantly. Lyusia, where are you? Lyusia. The burns on his arms and legs were cracking. Whenever he turned his head, a chunk of hair would be left on his pillow. I tried joking about it. It is convenient. You no longer need a comb. And me? I'm doing whatever it takes so that he does not have to think about death, about his death, about how horrible it is, about the fact that I am afraid of him, Someone told me he is no longer your husband. Not a beloved person, but a radioactive object with a high density of poisoning. You are not suicidal. Get a hold of yourself. But I am like someone who has lost her mind because I love him. He is lying there sleeping, and I am whispering, I love you. That morning, Tanya begged me, please, come with me to the cemetery. I cannot go there alone. They were burying a friend of my Vasya's. I had to go. Someone at the cemetery had a photograph of us all the day before the explosion. Our husbands were so handsome and happy. It was the last day of that life. When I got back to the hospital, I went directly to the nurse's station. But I was told that he had died 15 minutes ago. 15 minutes? I was gone for 3 hours. I went to the window and I yelled. I looked up at the sky and I screamed. But I did not leave him after that. I went with him all the way to the gravesite, but that's not what I remember. What I remember is the plastic bag. They wrapped his body in a cellophane bag, placed it in a wooden coffin, wrapped in another bag, and entombed it in a zinc coffin. I came back to Moscow 3 months later, to the cemetery, to him, and just as I started talking to him, I went into labor. They showed her to me, a little girl. Natasha, I called out, your papa named you Natasha. Then they brought me the little wooden box and said, she's in there. I looked. She was just ashes. So I asked them to let her rest at his feet. But there at the cemetery, it does not say Natasha Ignitenko. It doesn't say anything. She didn't have a name. She was just a soul. That's what I buried there. But she saved me, my little girl. I killed her. She took the whole radioactive shock into herself. But she was so small. And I loved her. Because you can't kill something with love, right? Who is going to explain this to me? Love and death? Why do they always go together? They die, but no one asks. No one asks what we've been through, what we've seen. They don't want to hear about death, about what scares them.